Welcome, everybody. My name is Jon Clay, VP of Threat Intelligence here at Trend Micro, and welcome to episode 19 of our Trend Talks BizSec. Joining me, as always, is Ed Cabrera, Chief Cybersecurity Officer with Trend Micro. Ed, how are you today?
Fantastic. Great topic today that I think everybody's really concerned about and has to address on a daily basis.
Yeah, and our topic today is cyber insurance, and we have a special guest speaker with us here, Vince Kearns. I've known Vince for many, many years at Trend Micro. Great guy, and when he gets a topic that he has to deal with, he just dives into it, and that's what he's been doing with cyber insurance for the last several years. So we thought we'd have him on to talk all about cyber insurance. Vince, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, John. I really appreciate the opportunity here. Vince Kearns. I am a cyber risk strategist here at Trend Micro with a concentration on cyber insurance and incident response.
Excellent. So let's first talk a little bit, Vince, about the origins of cyber insurance. Years ago, we had these threats that were targeting organizations, cyber threats. And we started to see a lot of them having to deal with ransomware, for example, and all of a sudden that started exploding. Was that sort of when we saw cyber insurance take off?
Oh, it's probably when we heard it, when we started hearing about it in the news and our customers dealing with it. John, it actually started probably about 12 to 13 years ago. Beasley was the first company to offer a cyber insurance policy, but and where it really came from is that, customers have to have general liability. They need to have an errors and omissions policy. And carriers and brokers have been selling those policies to these customers for decades, right? Well, then they kind of go, wow, we've got this little situation over here where we can offer a policy to insure their against a breach, right? And collect a premium. And at the time, not pay out very many claims, and it was really a windfall. And for about 6 or 7 years, it was the fastest growing segment of the insurance industry. And so cyber started actually about 12 years ago.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like the car insurance, where you have this huge pool of insurers of cars, but then all of a sudden you have this massive amount of people crashing their cars and having to get the policy, right? That's sort of what we saw here, whereas all of a sudden the cyber insurance companies started to getting all of their customers were getting infected, they were getting breached, and they were trying to get their policies done, right?
Yeah. And where they struggled, though, again, at first, when there was no claims, it was real easy. I'm sure they used some kind of algorithm, but they really didn't know. They didn't have decades and decades of actuarial data like they have on cars, like they have on our homes and our health. So in a lot of ways, they were making their best guess on what should be charged. And until the ransomware epidemic in 19 and the first half of 2020, did they realize that these threats are always evolving and they can hit at any time. So that's the big difference in what this industry has sold for decades and with cyber, is that there's no predictor. There's no a bunch of data to predict off of. And the other thing is that the incidents, if for car wrecks, they're kind of similar. Some cars are more expensive than others, but for the most part, they have a good idea how much the claim is. For a cyber attack, there's really no way to know how long they're going to be out of business, how much the ransom is going to be. So there's a lot of variables in a cyber insurance policy that they just weren't used to, hence the disarray or just really lack of standardization in the cyber insurance market.
Hey, Vince, let me ask you, have you, currently we talk about, when you go to the doctor, right, you have to fill out your past medical history, obviously, even to see a regular doctor. Same thing when you go to get life insurance, right? You have to fill out forms to possibly even give blood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before you're actually pre-qualified. Is this where we're going with cyber insurance when it comes to understanding how resilient companies are, because I think you hit on it. We're talking about how hard it is to quantify risk, and it's really hard for insurance companies to really get a handle on it. Albeit there's probably other similar risks that are out there that they're able to quantify. But what are you seeing, coming around the corner when it comes to getting and maintaining, policies and keeping your premiums low?
Great question. I'm going to kind of go back in time again, because in that period when cyber insurance first came out, the questionnaires were 3 or 5 questions. I kind of joked that if you could fog a mirror, you could get a cyber insurance policy, right? I mean, it was that easy. And when the insurance industry had to respond to a bunch of claims in 2019 and 2020, they had to get better at measuring risk. Today, they are always looking for better, more efficient, more effective ways to assess the risk. Outside in scans are good, but they really didn't give you an idea of what's going on inside the firewall. So what they're doing now is getting more invasive with the customer and asking better questions. Oh my, just the iterations I've seen in the almost 2 years of being in this role, the progress of the forms have gotten better. They're asking better questions. Are they asking the right questions yet? I would definitely ask a few of the questions that they're asking in a different way. Example: do you have EDR? Yes or no? We know that answering that as yes is only half the battle. How are you managing that EDR? Is it deployed 100%? And so the questionnaires have gotten better, and I believe where it's heading, Ed, is that being able to get that telemetry on an ongoing basis. Because today we just talked about how hard it is to assess the risk. Well, they're only doing it one time a year at contract time or renewal. Where it's heading is being able to assess the risk on an ongoing basis. So if they have a risk score of X and a vulnerability hits their network, that score should get worse, right? And so being able to do that ongoing is something that they desire, and I believe that's where the market is heading. Ongoing telemetry to continually assess is where we're headed.
Yeah, interesting. Vince, 2 things. When I've talked to some customers about cyber insurance, they've brought up a few things, and one of them we've just seen play out. So if you think about Maersk got hit with WannaCry, and they had Lloyd's of London. They went to court with Lloyd's of London because Lloyd's claimed it was a cyber warfare, or it was nation state. Merck just got hit with NotPetya a number of years ago, and they've been battling with their insurance company. So where are you seeing these insurance companies? It's this idea that if it's done by a nation state in a cyber warfare, I don't pay out the claim, or it's one of these. So what do you see in this area?
So great question. That Lloyd's of London decision a few years ago really threw a monkey wrench into the whole ecosystem. When I talk to customers, the first and foremost thing I say is you've got to read the fine print, get your legal team involved, and understand what is covered and what is not. And yes, you're starting to see language about nation states, and if it's in there, it's not going to be paid. There was a recent lawsuit where the court ruled in favor of the plaintiff, and the carrier was on the hook for a nation state. Why? The language wasn't in there. So I bring this up, and it's a great question because there's other language you have to look for. There are things called sublimits. If you are buying a $5 million policy, you feel like that's good, that if I get hit, I'm going to be able to stay in business and do all the great things that cyber insurance does. But if you read the fine print, if it's ransomware, it's only covered for $250K. That's a sublimit. If you get hit by ransomware, you think you're going to get $5 million. It's only $250K. So you've got to look at that. There are other exclusions that the nation state would fall under. So the advice that I give to customers is trust your broker and ensure that they're out working with multiple carriers on your behalf, understanding your infrastructure. Go to multiple carriers, get the right policy for you, and then get your legal team to make sure you read the fine print.
Now, I have to agree a lot there, Vince, because even the customers and CISOs I've talked to it's not only, doing the proper enterprise risk management to include cyber risk is one step. Doing security at the proper level is another step to resilience, right? We talk about risk to resilience. But I think, a big part of it is about communicating that, right? So all these insurance carriers and brokers are not all the same. And to your point, if you're a customer that's in this sector, financial as opposed to healthcare, there is a lot of risk that really are more heightened, possibly in healthcare, come up from an operational risk because you have the life and safety of patients that possibly are at a hospital. And so absolutely doing your due diligence and really understanding the policies that they're actually providing you and possibly selling you, and understanding the ins and outs, but also doing the work that you need to do to be resilient. And lastly is communicate that. We had a very good customer of ours actually, go back. His premium was a little high, and he basically went back and spoke to the insurance carrier and said, listen, this is my security stack and this is my strategy, and this is how I'm going to be more resilient. And it turned out he ended up getting some discounted premium. So absolutely agree with you. I found the same thing.
Ed, it's a great summary. I would put it this way, is that showing cybersecurity maturity to your carrier, underwriter, or your broker, that is what they're looking for. Based on what they're asking you, if you can't check the box yes, and they want you to, they want to hear your plan to close that gap. So it's all about communicating the cybersecurity maturity, and you've chosen this stack for a reason, right? You had many options. You chose this stack, and here's why I feel like I'm resilient, and that should be a positive conversation based on the cybersecurity maturity of the organization. And it sounds like your customer that you talked to was able to communicate that maturity that they were looking for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Vince, you've obviously talked to a lot of the brokers and carriers over the last several years. Where are we going? So if I'm either a new person trying to get a new policy or I'm looking to renew, what are some of the key things that these insurance companies are looking for from the security stack, from the processes, people, process, technology that these carriers are going to look for, so that I ensure I have these done, I have this capability, so I have a lot higher, better chance of getting a premium?
Great question, John. So from a security posture standpoint, they've got a couple of requirements I'll talk about in a second. The thing that the customers have to understand is there's more factors to the calculation of your premium and deductible than your security posture. Security posture is very, very important. However, the number of records that you keep, right? If it's customer records or patient records, that throws your risk into another stratosphere. The industry that you're in. Some industries are more targeted than other industries, so they take all of that into consideration when coming up with the pricing or the policy. And when it comes to the security posture, they learned a few things over the years. Again, end of 18, all of 19, and the beginning of 20, is that if you had a multi-factor authentication software in place, it lowered the claim 100% of the time. Hence, MFA is now required to get almost every single cyber insurance policy that I've seen. Side note, did you hear much about MFA companies before 2018? Probably not, right? I mean, this thing exploded that industry. Fast forward about 18 months, the ecosystem realized that having a strong backup strategy, so either encrypted backups on site, in the cloud, you just being able to prove that you have your infrastructure backed up in a way that is easily accessible. Why do they mandate that? Because 100% of the times it reduces a claim. And last summer, we saw the vast majority of carriers start to mandate an EDR solution, endpoint detection and response. And the reason for that is we all know that EDR it's better than EPP, but for this ecosystem, it 100% of the time reduces a claim. Why? The telemetry that an EDR sensor is able to gather and quickly get it to the person in charge of the incident response allows the downtime to be smaller. It allows them to get back up and running faster and just really recover the data. So the three controls that are in place today are MFA, a backup strategy, and endpoint detection and response.
Excellent, excellent. And one thing I think a lot of companies or customers don't realize that with Trend Micro, our Vision 1 now, we're actually giving customers a risk score. I know you've been talking to this with this about a risk score capability to the carriers and stuff. You mentioned continuous monitoring, and they'd love to have telemetry. Is that risk score, would that be something that a customer could take to the carrier and say, hey, my risk score today is X is 65, but later it's 50 because I've implemented these risk reduction capabilities, and that maybe allow them to lower their premium potentially?
Absolutely. And in theory, everything you just said is correct. However, let's put it in practical application. Is that this score is great. How long does it take for us to explain how we came up with that score just to our customers, right? I've talked to a lot of our customers who understand it and get it, and we're doing all the right things. But that's a concept that once they get, now we have to explain that to the broker. And even if this broker or carrier underwriter understands, the entity understands that this risk score from Trend is good, that individual broker or that individual underwriter may not understand. It's going to take time for that type of methodology to be accepted. Cool thing is, Trend Micro is absolutely out on the front lines with this, having these discussions with these underwriters to get their feedback and figure out what parts of our API are they able to use, what parts are they not able to use, and sometimes which parts are the customers willing to share with them in that API. So that's where the world's moving. And I have a slide in my normal deck that talks about that Geico app, right? I mean, since it monitors how you're driving, and in theory, a CISO that runs a good organization, that does the right things, that gets the right solutions, that mitigates risk in the right way on an ongoing basis, he should feel a win by getting a premium price, a discount. You really can't say that. I'm struggling. Preferred pricing, that's the word I'm looking for, from their carrier, because of their hygiene is good and always getting better.
I think you're right. I think that the goal, I think from a cyber risk perspective, absolutely, I think to get to, and you sort of alluded to that, and I think some of our conversations before we even jumped on here was talking about how unique the problem is in the auto industry. Vince, you actually mentioned that, sort of the parameters around an auto accident, what goes into it, the speed, the behavior of the driver, and this and that or the other. So it's probably much easier to identify metrics in a vehicle and to be able to then translate into a risk score. And so I think they've done a good job of quantifying that. And I think the challenge is, to your point, is like, all right, that's one of the big challenges for any CISO is obviously identifying key risk indicators, but then also what are your metrics? What are the key performance indicators of your entire program, be it your products, your people, the technology, all across the board, and processes. And then so what are you doing to enhance your resiliency, right, to these attacks? And so it's a much harder thing to do, but I think we all would love to see if we can come up with some magical algorithm to be able to at least quantify in a much easier manner and really prove, right? Because you could say, we all know from a regulatory compliance perspective that you can pass your audit and you're compliant, but that has nothing to do with the actual security, because that is just a point in time, assessment of your risk. And so it's all about this continuous assessment, and that's where we need to get to. And I think that's the challenge, but I think we'll get there. I think for sure we'll get there.
100%. And talking to some of our product people, we are all over. And just in a nutshell, as again, I've been doing this role for almost 2 years. I feel like what Trend Micro was doing and is doing around Vision One, Service One Complete, it was tailor made for this ecosystem. We just didn't know that it was. And now that we do, the conversations are getting so much easier with these carrier underwriters and the brokers. It's Trend Micro had that gap of knowledge from this ecosystem. These carriers have been around for decades. Who's Trend Micro? Now they're starting to understand, whoa, okay, Trend Micro is assessing risk. And like I said, everything that we're doing around Vision One is just tailor-made for this industry.
Well, excellent. Hey, guys, I think we're about to wrap up. Ed or Vince, any last comments for the audience?
No, the only thing
Oh, go ahead, Ed.
No, I think what I would say is just, as we said before, I mean, do your due diligence, right? I mean, understand the risks that you face, the vulnerabilities that you have, do your homework around what, insurance companies and brokers, talk to your colleagues. You can learn a lot from your colleagues and, obviously doing from your own research, but in the end, it's from a position of strength and resilience that you're going to be able to get the right plan, right policy, and the right premium.
Excellent. Yeah. So a couple of things, Jon. Is earlier I spoke about some of the security controls. The one the biggest one that I wanted to end on is having an incident response plan. So part of that cybersecurity maturity is being able to say, I can't control a knucklehead clicking on a link. It just, it's going to happen. And if that happens and my house catches on fire, I know exactly what I'm going to do. Here's my incident response plan. Here's exactly who I'm going to call. And that, again, that's part of cybersecurity maturity. So incident response plan, super important. And then the other things that to watch out for in the next 18 to 24 months is vulnerability prioritization. So carriers are now they've been paying claims on a vulnerability where a patch has been out there for 150 days. That's not going to watch for language for vulnerability prioritization and not paying claims if a vulnerability has been out for more than X amount of days. The other is a little bit longer out, about 24 months. You're looking at for the same policy you would get today, you're going to need a second set of eyes, a managed solution in order to qualify. So these security controls are decent now, but they're only going to get stronger in two ways. One, vulnerability prioritization, and having a second set of eyes or a managed solution. Those two things, along with having an incident response plan, are really the things that I would like the audience to take away from today.
Perfect. Well, Vince, it's been great chatting with you today. You definitely sound like the expert, and if customers are interested, they can always contact Trend Micro, and we can have a even deeper dive on cyber insurance with them, or how we can help mitigate and minimize their risk. But everybody, thanks very much for watching today, episode 19 of Trend Talks BizSec. Ed and I will be back in 2 weeks to talk about another topic. But again, thanks very much to our special guest speaker, Vince Kearns, and Ed, thanks for your insight as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.